gentlemen, and welcome back to the Two Average Brown Bros podcast. I'm your host, Brushank,
And I'm your host, Andres.
and today is September 20th, Monday. Andres, what's happening, man?
Well, it's the last official day of summer, and that's a bummer. Yeah, well, it's kind of like a little bit of a bummer, but not really because I really enjoy autumn a lot. So I'm really happy for the new season and sweater weather and leaves changing color and all of that. But it's been 2 summers and I just want a regular summer. That's all I'm wishing for. Um, but yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that's going on in right now. What about you, man? How you doing?
For me, I don't like the winter as much. So you saying fall kind of scared me because I realized the other day I was going for a walk and all the leaves are starting to change colors. So you're right, winter is coming, and don't like that. But you know what? After winter, it's all spring and summer again. So looking forward to those already.
Yeah. So, Shank, what did you learn this week?
So this week, there's something current event happening that I've been following quite extensively is the disappearance of Gabby Petito. I don't know if you've heard about it, but to summarize it for people that haven't heard about it, it's this girl named Gabby Petito and her boyfriend Brian Laundrie. They left their home. Um, well, they lived in Florida, but they left New York on July 2nd to do a cross country USA road trip. They were planning to go to all the uh, national parks in like Utah, Colorado, Wyoming, and then head to Oregon. I think that's their final destination. And they were both like wannabe influencers, like YouTubers. They had bought a van, so to live out of a van and travel out of the van like most people. It's something that's pretty like big on Instagram, the van life, I guess. People buy old vans, retrofit it to have like a bed and like tables, and then just travel in that. So they had been traveling since July 2nd, and you know, so something happened obviously, and she went missing. Gabby went missing. Sometime they don't know when. Sometime in August, I think they think, because she had posted her last final Instagram post sometime August 25th, and then just a week after they launched her YouTube channel. And the really weird thing is Brian Laundrie actually, he drove back to Florida where his parents live, and that's where him and Gabby used to live. He went back and then didn't say anything, didn't contact her parents, like he hasn't said anything. So it was really weird, obviously when someone goes missing like that and the main person doesn't say anything. So I think he went back on September 1st, and then her family reported her missing September 11th. So there was 10 days of nothingness pretty much. And on September 15th he was officially named a person of interest. On Friday, September 17th, what happened was police actually got I guess they got warrants to go inside the house, and they talked to Brian's parents, and turns out now he's missing too. So people are thinking that his parents allowed him to like go missing, aka help him to leave the place so he doesn't get in trouble. So it's kind of all suspicious, but it's been something that I've been heavily invested in the last like week or so, because it is a weird missing persons case. But let's see. They say missing persons obviously not good after the first 48 hours, but let's see if it turns out to be good news or sad news, or I'll be following this case pretty extensively.
Damn, that is quite something that's going down there. The only thought that came through my mind is just like was like Florida people.
Well, that was the other thing, because there was as the police were going into Brian's house the other day, um it was crazy because all these protesters and like people were right in front of his house, like asking, demanding for Brian, which makes sense. Like obviously they want Brian to speak and all, but it's kind of like defeats the purpose of like an investigation when people are like all up their house. But I mean, public opinion is different than the um, you know criminal opinion.
Yeah, nope, absolutely. And even though there's a couple of things that seem pretty fishy and all of that, the law is the law, and you're innocent until proven otherwise.
Exactly. So, Andres, what'd you learn this past week?
What did I learn this past week? This past week, I learned a lot about the world of gymnastics. For some reason, I got into this loophole of gymnastics and rewatching a lot of gymnastics, like World Cups, World Championships, Olympics, and all of that. I learned a lot about the history of gymnastics and how it has changed throughout the years, and the code of points, and understanding why now it's not like like it used to be from 0 to 10, and now it's more of a complex scoring system, and the physics to it, and kind of like how the moments of inertia will help all of that. So I really went downhill in that spiral of gymnastics, but pretty interesting because now I like understanding sports when I can also understand the physics behind them, which is very nerdy of me. But yeah, that's basically what outside of school, what my YouTube search has been.
And there's also the trial going on with the gymnastics from the Larry Nasser case as well, right?
Oh yeah, that case with the like gymnastics, it's been going for a while. So who knows if I really hope there's some change to it. It's like when it's a but the thing that makes it harder is when it's something systematic. It's really um it's not that it's hard to change, it's just the willingness of the people in like the organization wanting to make that change, right?
Yeah.
Because like we mentioned like last week on the episode, right? Like, why would you change something if it's working for you? Um, but in this case, I mean, there's a lot of people that have spoken. So hopefully there's something happening soon. But that from what you can tell, there's not a lot, or like the things that are being done. The people that were like like suffer and had like experience like unwanted experiences, um they still feel that it's not enough, and I mean it is fair. So hopefully that changes, and not only in gymnastics, I bet it is something that also happens in other sports. So hopefully this sparks up the conversation to to get rid of that. It's not cool to have that in sports.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, that's a perfect segue to the main topic, as we were talking about with current events. You know, this week I really wanted to focus on big news events that happened throughout our lifetime that we remember well, right? So whether, you're growing up and you remember 9/11, or, other events that happened in like Mexico or Nepal, like, I wanted to talk about it because I think that'd be a really interesting and cool topic that, we really haven't thought about before.
Absolutely, I am down for that, and I'm ready to age myself in front of everyone.
So, Andres, what's one of the first, big story events that happened in the world that you remember?
I think one of the biggest ones actually is just the turn of millennia. I remember going out and celebrating. Actually, for that, I think it was a dual celebration that we did in Mexico. But I just like I was pretty young still. Like I was still like a kid when this happened. But just hearing my parents talk about it and keep on talking about it later on, like the change of 1999 to 2000 was such a big thing. And like it also feels special now looking back into it, because it's just like, yeah, I like got to live in two different millennia, which I mean right now a lot of people can say that, but as like as we continue to grow, less and less people will be able to say that they were able to live into different um, into different millennia and into different centuries, which is pretty amazing. And like, I mean, everything that the world had to go, right? Everyone was scared. What would happen to computers? Like, are they going to be able to compute the change for the year? And there's always this big thing about people interpreting either the Aztec or the Mayan calendar. So like, is the world gonna end on 2000? Is the Antichrist gonna come? So yeah, I remember it being such a huge thing. But now we're on 2021, so I guess we're still alive.
So I guess that whole Y2K event, yeah, for me, I don't, I didn't know about that till way later. I guess, at that time I was only 5 years old. So I don't remember too much, my memory of being that young, super, fuzzy. I can remember things here or there, but that definitely would have been a big change for, a lot of people. It's a new, like even for us, going into 2020 is such a big deal because it's like a brand new decade. So I can't imagine, starting the year with a brand new millennia.
Yep, exactly, which I think is like a very interesting thing. But yeah, I think that's one of the big events that comes to my mind whenever I think for the past couple of years of what has happened in the world.
For me, one of the first major events I remember is 9/11. At that time, I had just moved to New Zealand with my mom, and my dad was already living there. And I think in New Zealand, if I remember correctly, it was a morning when it happened. Um, Similar to here, I think it was at sometime in the morning, but they're a whole day ahead. But I remember just watching the news, and it was like something big had happened. And so then I remember talking to my dad. I'm like, whoa, like what happened? And then just like I guess that was my first really introduction to like the news world, because before that, I was still a kid. I was an ignorant kid, super young, like 5, 6 at that time. So obviously didn't really care about current events or the news happening throughout the world. But when that happened, that was on the news like all the time. Everyone was talking about it. Um, it was big. It was my first introduction to the news, and I guess it wasn't, in the New Zealand, it wasn't a big deal at my age, I guess, to everyone else. But when something like that happens to the U.S., the whole world is on notice.
Oh yeah, no, everyone really pays attention to it, and I think for that, it's just the big implication that it meant, right? It's just like it was an attack on a Western country. We were to put it that way. So, um, I mean, it's fair that everyone was concerned, and like I feel like everyone around the world was concerned about the security of their own country because who knew, right? What could happen after that if they were able to attack the states at that level? Who would be in a certain way safe?
Absolutely, yep.
Yeah, no, I remember when it happened, and actually that day, I didn't go to school because we woke up late, and there was no way we will make it to school. So I still did some school work in the morning from home. But yeah, I remember looking at it like in the news, and it was just like it was very shocking. And I remember my mom's reactions to it, and she was like very shocked about that happening. So yeah, definitely I mean, it's such an impactful event, right? That every year there, like we remember it.
Absolutely. And one of the biggest things I think for me personally that I remember afterwards was when I moved from New Zealand to US, airport security was so much tighter, even in like, other countries, not just the US. Like obviously US is gonna step up their measures way like higher, but like even other countries that I like transited through was like their security was a lot higher, and it makes sense, right? Like something never imagined before had happened. I mean, obviously hijackings had happened in the past, but like something to this extent that had never happened.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I mean, happening outside of a war context, like
Mhm.
usually, like you will see like bombings and things like that, but like you will see something like that during times of conflict and war, but never when we like the world was supposed to be at peace.
Exactly. Definitely. Another big event that, moving forward, another big event that I remember, I guess two back to back ones, was the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami outside of Indonesia, followed by the next year, Hurricane Katrina that hit New Orleans. Both were big, major, um, weather slash climate, whatever you want to call it, big events that happened. And both of those, I was living in the US at that time, um, going to middle school. And again, that was my first real introduction to weather events. Because before that, living in New Zealand, we got the occasional earthquakes, and I knew about like earthquakes, but I hadn't really dug my dug deep into the world of those catastrophic weather events. So having been lived in the U.S. when Hurricane Katrina happened, it was like something major because and especially with the news, 24/7 news, CNN, Fox, everything, we have that at home. It was, it hit home so hard because you saw the state of people, and so especially the tsunami, because it was right close to Nepal. Obviously, Nepal's landlocked, so we don't get the effects. But like India got hit pretty hard with it, I think, and Indonesia got super hit hard. And there was so many people that died from that tsunami. It was over 200,000, which is crazy to think about, right? Because back in the day, the technology was good, but not to the level it is today. And even with Hurricane Katrina, it was for me, just hearing about it on the news, talking about it at school, it was absolutely insane.
And all the I from what I remember, it's all like for us, it was all the major relief campaigns and programs that were put in place in order to help places that were being damaged. And I think for me, at least, and like for us as a Mexican society, because we experience that, right? Like on our Caribbean coast, we experience a lot of hurricanes during hurricane season, and like it's not big news for us to be able to do damage or relief control from hurricanes. So it's like we understand the damage and the impact those big major things could happen. So I remember every single time there was like a thing like that going on, uh, like all the efforts that not all like at the country level, but like at the school level will do in order to be able to support everyone when that happens. So with that, like other big major, like I would say, natural disasters that I remember were like the hurricane in Haiti. Oh no, the hurricane and the earthquakes in Haiti, and then the big, massive, very huge earthquake in Chile. And then I remember all that, and because Mexico usually sends uh, rescue people to help out in those, just because we have the experience from the past of what it is to live through a very massive earthquake. So whenever there's very big natural disasters in which people need to be rescued, uh, we always send our people because uh, we're happy we can help. But yeah, no, there's been a lot of big uh, and like weather, nature related things, plus some volcanic explosions, which those ones were not really heard of until like we move into the 2010s or like close to the like to like their current year. Um, Volcanic eruptions were not really like they were not really a thing we will hear often, but lately it's like I don't know if it's because I'm more in tune with the news or something, and they're being broadcasted more, or actually we're seeing a lot more of that.
Yep, absolutely. And that reminds me of um, another thing that you reminded me of was the earthquake in Nepal, because that was one of the most recent ones. It happened in 2015, April 2015. I remember because it was like final seasons time in university, and you know, and it was towards the end, so I think I had finished most of my finals except for one or two left, and and it was scary because we lost contact with so many people within Kathmandu, and my cousin was actually visiting Nepal at that time, and it was just probably one of the biggest ones that Nepal has felt in a long time. And even when I went to Nepal after that in 2017, the after like not the aftershocks obviously still happen small here and there of other earthquakes. Nepal is prone to earthquakes, but the buildings were still down, most of them still cracked. Nepal's a really poor country, so they hadn't fixed everything. So it's kind of sad when you see not just earthquakes, but like you mentioned, volcanoes or cyclones, tsunamis, even wildfires, right? Like I'm sure we both remember some of the bigger wildfires that has been happening in the last like year or two in California, BC, Australia. Big things happening.
Oh yeah, with wildfires, I remember. I think I'm pretty sure it probably was 20. It was either 2015 or 2016. that we got hit like with the big wildfires up north in Saskatchewan, that the smoke made it all the way down to to the city centers in the province, and it literally looked like the apocalypse had started because it was super smoky. If you went outside, you were literally inhaling smoke, and all the time, because it was during the summer, right? All the time it looked like reddish outside because of with the smoke. So it really, like, for a couple of, I would say it was like weeks, it felt like Saskatchewan had fallen into the apocalypse.
Yeah, the wildfires, is crazy because the Saskatchewan ones. I remember, Saskatoon was pretty much you couldn't see anything for you know, like the sun looked super red and super like smoky, and even as far as Regina, like some days Regina was really bad. I remember.
Yeah, and then I think outside of the natural realm, just to move us along a little bit with it, uh, as someone that so this is like pretty, like, for me it was like a big event because, well, for some of you might not know, but I went to Catholic elementary school. So, very religious. We pray every morning and we go to mass and all of that. So, of course, when the passing of Pope John Paul II, it was met with like, it was like, yeah, like, for like, at least for us back home, like in every level, like family, country wise, school wise, and all that, it really took a hit because, um the way that he carry on, his popeship, if that's what you call it, it was very different from those, from like what people say from previous popes. And for Mexico, it really took a real big hit because he for some reason really liked our like Mexico. He really liked visiting, not only because a lot of popes will, like, if they go to Latin America, they will only go to the big countries and they will only go to the big cities. Um, but John Paul took an effort to visit our indigenous communities and to connect with the people, like, inside like those rural and remote areas. So yeah, the passing of him and just like getting to be like, okay, what's next, right? Because he really had set up the standard for many of us Catholics of what it meant to be a pope and what a pope should do, like, for the world, uh, and how to help others from the like their institution of Catholicism, right? And like moving forward with Benedict having the first pope to, in a certain way, resign his post, which was so controversial. Like, no matter, like, in that way which religion you were part of or you practice, it was it was such a controversial decision because, um, and like for many out there, when someone is elected to be the pope, you're the head of the church, the Roman Catholic Church, but also it is a post that you have to cover until you literally pass away. Nobody had ever resigned in modern era. Uh, Never resign such a post because you're being called by God to do it. So that was it was very controversial, and nowadays it's still like a very controversial topic because it did put into question like the validity of like the institution and the validity of, you know the clerical hierarchy.
Yep, exactly. And for me, I don't remember it too much because I'm not Christian, obviously. But I know the popes, any pope has big influence in the world, and especially nowadays, being a little bit more progressive and open. I think, definitely that would have had a big impact on any Christian Catholic person.
So yeah, so what other events for you, Zhang, really like marked marked like the 2000s for you?
Um, three of the bigger ones, I guess. I mean, three of them, I guess, relating to like you know people are the death of Saddam Hussein, Gaddafi, and Osama bin Laden. I know, kind of morbid to talk about terrorists, but like those were big because for most of them, I lived in North America, and when you've heard blow out these names over and over, and you see all the atrocities they've like pulled over the years, and it's just crazy to think that they were finally captured and executed. And I remember some of them pretty vividly because, especially the Osama one, because that was during 2011, May. I think I had just come back from a road trip with my parents, and I was staying at a family friend's house in Saskatoon. And all of a sudden, you see Barack Obama on the news talking about it, and it was like super surreal because it's like, wait, Osama, he's been around forever, and people have been trying to find him forever. All the memes about him, hiding forever, but they finally caught him, and killed him. So it was really crazy to see it happen, unfold, live. And even with Saddam Hussein, it was like that was a little bit earlier than that. Was around like 2006, I believe. But him being caught was super big in the U.S. because he was one of the big, U.S.'s big boogeymans that they had been following for a while. So I think those things I really remember because of the place I was in, plus the significance of who was captured.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, yeah, it just really plays an impact on, how international relationships and international diplomacy, it really like those events really shape how nowadays we deal with the Middle East.
Yep, exactly. And I think, and the thing is, like, with those events, U.S. is always going to be heavily involved, right? So U.S. and even Canada, like, I'm sure if we were in some parts of Africa or even Asia, like if we're in Nepal, it'd be news, but it wouldn't be as prevalent or even this big as it when we were here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it affects everyone in a different way. And then you brought up Barack Obama, so who can forget the election of the first African American president of the United States? Such a huge impact.
Absolutely. And see, I'm glad up you brought elections because, and like we talked about last week, Nepal didn't have elections, and I was too young to vote in U.S. and New Zealand. But coming to Canada, being able to vote here, elections have been pretty big, no matter where I have been, whether it's U.S., where George Bush first won in 2004, my first big election having moved to the U.S. at that time, you know, or like you mentioned, 2008 when Barack Obama won it and became the first African American president in the U.S., or when Hillary was running to be the first woman president in 2016. Although we all know how that election went, it was big, right?
Yeah, it's major because like a lot of those voices, like when you think about it, it's just like why did it take so long for those voices to reach those offices, right? Or to be able to like make um a decent standing and a decent run for them because so a little bit of a sidetrack in terms of Hillary. I was watching like I really got into watching and learning more about her like way back like I want to say like a couple of months ago. So of course I watched her documentary and I watched a lot of interviews and kind of like the history of women in politics in the States. And it's impressive. Like, yeah, there's been efforts from other women across history to try to go and nominate themselves for presidential running or vice presidency, right? But never got to the level until 2016, right? In which Hillary was the candidate um, for one of the major parties for that. So it's just like it puts into perspective, like even though we want to say like, oh, we're so advanced and we have make leaps in terms of like human rights and equality and equity, when you think about things like that, it's just like, have we though? It really puts things into perspective of like how much we've actually advanced in those themes.
Exactly. One thing that I just got reminded of as we talked about at the beginning of the episode, the disappearing of Gabby. Two major events that happened, pretty much almost back to back, not quite, but it was around 2005 and 2007 when I lived in the U.S. Again, my first big introduction to 24-hour news was the disappearance of Natalie Holloway and the Virginia Tech shooting. I don't know if you remember those, but to recap it, pretty much Natalie Holloway, she was an 18-year-old American woman who pretty much disappeared when, after she went to Aruba with her classmates. Um, Her remains still haven't been found, and I remember, following that news extensively because at that time we had free cable through like the place that we lived, and obviously Fox News was on there, and I remember watching Greta Van Susteren and Nancy Grace pretty much all the time. They always had people on their shows, just following that because at that time it was pretty big, and it was just like Gabby Petito, it was a girl gone missing, and it was sad because her remains obviously haven't been found. I don't think her parents have got full closure yet. So I remember following that so much, and like that's why I talked about the discipline earlier today because it kind of like reminded me of following that case.
Oh, and that has like yeah, that has different impacts on places, right? But like for example, for me, uh, I don't remember. Like, I actually like don't remember hearing about those things in the news back in Mexico. I guess just culturally we're different, right? So like shootings and all of that, they look different for us, and they look uh, to like in the states. So I think maybe like probably was mentioned in the news or something, but it wasn't something that really made an impact on our day to day for us, which
Yeah.
is unfortunate and like something that we should consider, but nothing that like at least in our case we like in Mexico we don't see those events happening.
Absolutely, and even it's even true right now, right? Like, I mean, it's a little different now, but like I was saying, with the Virginia Tech shooting, that was my first introduction to school shootings in the U.S. And like I was living in the U.S. at that time, in middle school, and when that happened, it was big because that was probably one of the biggest, shootings that had happened in a long time. 32 people got killed, which is crazy to think about. Obviously, beyond 2007, there's been much, much worse shootings in the U.S., but it makes you think, like it for the US it's something really big, and even for the world, right? For a place like US to happen. But like nowadays it's become so frequent, we've pretty much become desensitized to it. And I think that's another thing that you brought up. If you live in other parts of the world, you worry about your local news because there's so much things happening in your own country. But I think one thing that I've learned throughout my life is the US is truly one of the biggest powers. And whenever something happens there, especially living in Canada nowadays, it affects us, right? Because we hear about it instantly. And especially with the age of social media, things happen so fast that, and, things are uploaded to Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, Facebook so fast that you hear about the news before it's official in the news these days.
Yeah, like news travels fast so quickly. No, but it is something that, I think it has its pros and cons, but I think we can talk about that in a different episode because we can go about the evolution of journalism to what it looks like. Um, but moving into like a different conversation, something that is not as depressing. Uh, something I remember, like we both watch sports, right? We're sports fans over here in case you haven't noticed. Um, but for me, one of the big sport events that happened and that the country went wild uh, was the 2012 Olympic Games in London. Mexico won this gold for soccer, or like how it's properly called, football. Yeah, we just went nuts. Like literally, I think the country stopped for a couple of days because, like, we're a football country. That's like our national sport, basically, and winning at the Olympic stage, right? It just meant so much for the country that we were uh yes, we like honestly was one of the biggest times that I've seen the country celebrate things.
I'm glad you brought up sports because, that is one of the things I remember vividly as a sports fan. um, lots of sporting events. Like I don't want to go through every single one because I could talk about that forever. But one of the first ones I remember is the 2006 NBA Finals, where Miami. So my favorite team. I had moved to the U.S. in 2003, started watching, in the NBA right away, and Miami became my favorite team at that time. When they won their first championship in 2006, it was like, wow, this is pretty cool. Um, and then after that, in 2010, when LeBron, pretty much one of the best players of all time, he left Cleveland to go to Miami, right? Like that was one big sporting event that probably shocked a lot of vivid, uh, avid sports watcher because it was, something like that had never been done before in that level. So, and then soon after, obviously, they won the championship 2 times. But, sporting events, like you said, it brings lots of good memories, but also not so good memories for the others. But like you said, we've talked about enough depressing things that we can talk about happy things.
So, what are some happy things that you remember?
Obviously not big world news, but like in my personal news, like in 2003, my brother was born, so that was like super exciting and happy because I was getting a brother. I was 8 years old, and I was finally getting a brother, having been only child for 8 years. And I remember just being super happy, going to the hospital, meeting him, and then just pretty much growing up with him. And I mean, that's not a world news, but that was more of a personal news, right?
Hey, still a pretty big event in your life, so it matters.
Exactly. How about you, Andreas? What are some happy things that happened in your life?
Happy things that happen in my life. Well, I'm trying to think. Don't know. Pretty standard life, I guess.
For me, another thing I remember is just like my first travel, like solo travel. We talk about travel a lot, but my first solo travel that I did, it was like, I was anxious. Like the night before I was going to leave, I was so anxious because I've never done anything like that before. I was like, oh, I don't want to go on this. I was kind of hesitant, but I think those were just like the nerves, taking over me. But once I went on my first plane ride, it's like, you know what? What was I worried about? Obviously, lots of things to worry about, but it was like one of the most like relieving, most fun things I've ever done.
Yeah, now that you're talking about it, I mean, for me, like in my personal life, big events will be like, my family and I moving to Montreal for a year and living here. I'm falling in love with the country, which then like big cyclical thing, right? Like just one like that's where everything sparked for where I am basically right now. So I would say that's one of the biggest events. And I guess not major news but like or global news, but like for us like was just always a big event will be, I would say, watching my older brother compete at nationals, to be part of the national taekwondo team. That was fantastic. um and then just watching, like, I mean, in terms of like sports world and everything and also academics, like big news for us was like having academic teams winning world championships. So winning the math world championships or the robotics. I think those are always big news back in Mexico. Just that shows the capability that we have. But honestly, like in terms of my life, there's not a lot going on that is like, oh my god, this is so shocking. Uh, pretty standard life over here.
And yeah, this kind of also shows how we remember the bad things more than the good things, because lots of good things have happened over the years. A couple come to mind is, I don't know if you remember, I'm sure you do, but 33 Chilean miners that were rescued from the mine after 69 days. I remember watching that news extensively. When everyone came out, it was super happy because an operation like that has never happened before, and it was really cool to see things like that.
Oh yeah, definitely. And it's just like it's nice to see when the world comes together. I do also remember when Canada put the visa requirement for Mexicans because Mexican people that were, and I remember the reason why, because Mexican people that were being persecuted by the law will seek asylum over here. So then I guess Canada was like, enough is enough. And I remember in the early 2000s, I wouldn't say like around 2006, 2007, that's when we got the visa requirement, which honestly, like my parents were very mad about it because we have traveled to Canada without a visa requirement, and now they were making it harder. And it's 2021 and Mexico still has a visa requirement.
And another thing I remember also, in good news, I guess, is the ice bucket challenge. We did that together, but at that time, it was like, most people thought it was always just for show. People are just doing it, but in the end, like, it did raise over 115 million for the ALS Association, in 8 weeks, and people are still donating even now, and like that really, I think, those kind of activism, sometimes it can be good because people might have been just doing it for the show at the beginning, but over time it got to a point where people were actually helping out, donating, to research. And I personally think that was a really great thing.
Yeah, no, that was fantastic. Might have hated you for dumping ice cold water on me, but that's all right.
And then, of course, like, the Mars rovers landing in Mars, obviously. Those are always cool to see. Space, anything to do with space, there's technology is getting so much better these days that space exploration, it's just getting better and better. And I don't know if you've all seen the photos of, like, Saturn from, even 20 years ago compared to today. It's so beautiful right now. And even seeing Pluto, in colors pretty much compared to what we had back in the day. Anything, like that, it's been super cool.
And talking about Pluto, we observed the rise, fall, and I think back again rise of Pluto. So, which was just like, yeah, every like at least us, we learned that Pluto was a planet, and then we were told later on that Pluto ain't a planet anymore. Poor Pluto got degraded, downgraded, and then I'm pretty sure back again. I'm not sure. I have to read, but I'm pretty sure Pluto is back to being a planet.
Or,
So
or Pluto.
poor Pluto. Like Pluto is not messing with anyone. Pluto is doing its own thing. Even when it comes to elliptical patterns of like the planets, Pluto does its own thing. It doesn't follow the normal rules of how planets revolve around the sun. And over here, we're just trying to decide if Pluto is a planet or not.
What do you think, Andres? Is Pluto a planet?
I believe, like, from my basic, this is like me talking from a basic understanding of astronomy and how planets work. I believe Pluto is a planet just because, just because some people say, like, oh, the elliptical, how the elliptical form um, and route that Pluto takes is different from all the other planets. When I look at it, it's just like, yeah, maybe it's at a different angle, but also the universe and like our solar system ain't at like a two-dimensional model. It's a like three-dimensional model. So the elliptical still works just at a different angle within the same 3D model. So um, I do believe probably Pluto is a planet, um, but I'm not an expert on it, and I'll because I was taught that Pluto was a planet. I'll just keep it that way. It makes my life simpler.
Another big thing, obviously, that happened in the last, 10, 20 years was the invention of the iPhone. How can we forget that, right? One of the big
Oh God.
technological advances. I mean, we all have, iPhones or smartphones, but when the iPhone first came out, it was, I would say it's one of the biggest technological advances for sure, because it literally fit everything: a calculator, alarm clock, your computer, whatever you could think of in your hands.
Yeah, and like the evolution of cell phones, like honestly, it's just like what? Like I would say just like 20 years of how fast cell phones have evolved, from having those with, the Nokias. Like, I'm pretty sure Nokia doesn't sell a cell phone anymore. And back in the day, they were a huge thing. So it is astonishing to just look back and just look like, remember the Canadian powerhouse that BlackBerry was. And now, really, Blackberries now are a joke. If people have a BlackBerry nowadays, it is a joke.
Yep. And, we couldn't end the episode without mentioning COVID-19. One of the biggest events that's, pretty much affected the whole world, and that's been going on for almost 2 years now. We'll be up to the 2 year anniversary, and it's crazy to think how the world has changed even in the last 2 years because of COVID.
Oh yeah, and talking about epidemics, for me, I remember the H1N1
Hmm.
flu epidemic because when it started coming and spreading around the world, Mexico was deemed in a certain way like the source location of H1N1 for America. And I remember literally being told like because it happened over our spring break, which is during Easter. I remember our Easter break getting extended and extended and extended, but not because like you couldn't do a lot. Like at least for us, like the sports club closed. A lot of like recreational services were closed. Like people like literally like we were not physically on lockdown, but a lot of things like we couldn't do, even though like we kept on getting more in a certain way vacation, uh, in a way, which looking now is just like then people complain. I'm just like, well, some countries have had to gone through that for like outbreaks that happen in their area. Now it just happens that this one hit the entire world.
Hmm.
But I do remember living through H1N1 in Mexico as like one of the countries that got hit the hardest with that one. And in a way, I'm surprised that like with that and from SARS and MERS, um, I'm pretty sure like there's lessons on those, but still looks like none of those were implemented on the current one.
Yep, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up, just other pandemics or epidemics that happened. Like I remember, being in Nepal for a short time in 2003, and when the SARS outbreak, the original SARS outbreak, one was happening, and obviously Nepal's right next to China, so it was a big deal, but it wasn't obviously, big as some of the other ones that have happened. But at that time, it was scary because we thought we are gonna be heavily under like lockdowns or like it's gonna hit us pretty hard. But I left Nepal pretty quickly after that, and then came to the U.S. So it wasn't as big, you know, in the U.S. as it was in Nepal. Just the threat of it. But even with that, it was the original COVID. So when COVID-19 hit, it kind of brought back memories of the original COVID back in the day. But obviously, COVID-19 way 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 worse.
Oh yeah, the way that it has, we don't need to talk about it because we hear about it enough in the news. But yeah, lots of things have happened, and I think it really has. Some of them have shaped what the world looks like for everyone, and also I think for us, a lot of those have shaped. Um, at least for me, like a lot of these events have shaped the way I think and the way I carry on with my life and what I think about different topics, about uh, politics, international diplomacy, religion, sports, and how it has affected my life. It's just nice to reminisce once in a while in events outside our personal lives and try to understand how they had an impact on us.
Absolutely, and we've definitely forgotten so many. Like obviously they're big, but there's still so many things that we most likely have forgotten. Like on the top of my head, obviously, like Michael Jackson's death, that was pretty big, or Captain Sully landing the plane on the Hudson River, or other plane crashes or things that have happened, or even happy news such as like sports or people getting saved. Like there's so many things that happen that we definitely missed, and if you remember it, let us know and we'll bring it up and we'll talk about it because you know we're not we don't remember everything.
Yeah, and just looking for a little bit of a funny story, like short funny story, I promise, but it has to do with one of the topics you mentioned. So with the passing of Michael Jackson, I remember it because I was in middle school and one of our classmates was obsessed with Michael Jackson, like next level fan, like obsessed with him. Which I mean, it's a like he did like he put out some pretty good classics, some pretty amazing music, right, and production and entertainment. So Mark, like it was very recent, right after Michael had passed, and our music prof was obsessed with very contemporary music. So he had taught us during that term how to like like with all the different instruments that we had, uh, how like to play Michael Jackson. I think it was Beat It or something. And we were in English class, and like we could hear the music classroom, and they were starting to play that. And this person like jumps up of their seat and literally pushes one of the props out of the way. Like this prop like just goes against the wall because this person goes like, "That's Michael Jackson," and just runs out of the classroom, pushing everyone out of their way just to go and be able to be around like whoever was playing that one. And it is one of the most hilarious memories I have from middle school that me and my friends can never forget, because honestly, it was priceless to watch our English prof getting shoved against the wall by one of our classmates.
That yeah, that's really interesting, and it's funny how we can, big world events affects us all.
Yeah, but I think, yeah, like if you all have any interesting ones or interesting memories from world events, let us know about it. We want to hear from you.
Absolutely, and where can they reach us?
They can reach us at on Instagram and Twitter, like we say every week. So yeah, just reach us out over on our social media.
Absolutely. So, Andres, what are you looking forward to this upcoming week?
What am I looking forward for this upcoming week? I am looking forward um, for the full. I think pretty soon. Either it already happened or it's about to happen. Full moon. Uh, and it's harvest moon because it's coming into the autumn. So I'm excited about that. I am excited about sweater weather and starting to pull out some sweaters because a lot of my closet is sweaters. So ready to do that in a very fashionable city. So I'm uh, very happy about that. And I'm excited because this week I'm really planning on trying to explore a little bit more because I haven't been able to do that because of school. But I'm excited for all of that. And maybe I'll give in into having my first PSL of the season. So that's what's up for the week. What about you, buddy? What's coming up this week for you?
One thing I'm really looking forward to, obviously, is the Canadian elections. As we know, the Canadian elections happening September 20th. So when the episode gets released, it'll be out. So it'll be interesting to see how the polls go. We'll definitely touch up on it on the next episode. Looking forward to that. So, should be a good one.
Yeah, no, let's see. Well, yeah, let's see what the results are, and from that we'll see how the country moves forward. Which it's a little bit nerve wracking, not gonna lie.
Exactly. So, Andreas, where can our listeners reach out to us if they want to talk to us about anything?
If you want to talk about anything or everything, you can reach us at our social media on Instagram and Twitter, and that's the Two Average Brown Bros podcast. We're always there. We love social media, so don't be afraid to shoot us a message.
Exactly. So if you have any comments, concerns, questions, or any crybaby stuff, just reach out to us. Let us know your thoughts. We'll be happy to talk about them, have you on, and just generally talk about anything and everything like Andrea said.
Exactly. We will love to hear from you. We love hearing from you, and we will continue to love hearing from you. But that brings us to the very end of this week's episode. Slowly wrapping up into and going into autumn, which is very exciting. So I hope everyone is as excited as some of us are, and that you have a very lovely week. Uh, yeah, we'll just catch you up next Monday with a brand new topic. But other than that, we'll see you then. Bye.
See ya.